Right, so you scheduled me to follow Shane McGregor. And The Dark Knight Rises. Thank you. The only way I'm going to be able to recover from that, I think, is to give my talk in the voice of Bane. I will not do that. Well, when State of State approached me and said they're going to have a panel on higher education, a series on higher education, I thought, well, why don't we start with asking how the state of the state got to where it is now? What happened to the state in Penn State? And who should pay for public higher education? A generation ago, that isn't a question that would have even made any sense. The public pays for public higher education. It's a public commitment, folks. That's what it is. It's like public education in general. So here, 30 years ago, when Harrisburg would pick up 45% of the tab, in-state tuition was a little over $2,500, $5,700 adjusted for inflation. And this year, they pick up about 5.2% of the tab, and I don't even have to tell you what tuition is, $16,000, $17,000 for some others. Out of state, it's up over $25,000, which means the total costs for out-of-state students are now well in excess of $40,000. Look, I had italics, too. How did this happen? Well, we're not alone. It's cold comfort, but this has been going on across the country. Public higher education systems that were basically free. Yep, they were free because it was a public good. It benefited society as a whole. Universities created jobs, not only here, where they actually exist, but they created lifelong earnings, and they also did all sorts of research and development for people, too. Now it's considered a private investment, and the idea is that costs should be borne by individual students and their families. Here's some charts. This one goes up. 25 years ago, less than a quarter of all revenues across the country for higher education came from tuition. Now, 47%. Here's state support, declined everywhere except good old North Dakota. Keeping the faith. Up 30%, but every place else it is down precipitously. This is intensification. This is the last 5 years. It's been going on for 30, 40 years, but the last 5 have been especially intense, and that has also meant tuition as a percentage of public higher education revenue has also skyrocketed. All right, so that's the bad news. Here is just one little representation of how bad it actually is and how, within recent memory, it all is. That is the tuition chart for the University of California system. I started college in 1978, 79. I did not go to the UC system. I was in New York. But if I had, there's my tuition right up there, $300. Oh, no, I'm out of state. It's much more, $360. And it stays that way, no increases for quite some time, and now at the bottom, most recent figures, 2011, 2012, over $11,000, which I think is a 4,000% increase or something like that. It's a lot. Now, at some point, I have to admit, so I'll do it right now, that there are other state obligations to worry about. There's Medicare and Medicaid, there's healthcare. There's infrastructure. We do have decaying roads and bridges. There's prisons. That's an interesting story, though, because especially in California, and New York is very similar, you can almost chart, it's almost as if they took money from higher education and put it into prisons. An explosion of prison building largely had to do with the so-called war on drugs. Then, of course, there's the K-12 education system and pensions. There are other things on the table. I don't want to deny that. I don't want to suggest that we're the most important thing in the docket either. But here's what's really at stake. It's the sense that your education is now your private business, nobody else's. I'm going to mention this guy, Douglas Bruce. This comes from a recent article in the Chronicle of Higher Education. Students and families who once paid less than a third of the cost of college now cover almost 3/4 of it. To Mr. Bruce's way of thinking, that responsibility is just as it should be. Why should some truck driver or waitress have to pay for someone to get their degree in medieval literature? It's a good question. I have 3 answers. They're so important that I'm not putting them on PowerPoint. 1, that's the way taxes work, folks. When you pay taxes, any state of the union, it doesn't all go to your stuff. It goes also to other people's stuff. That's what living in a society is like. But let me get to the medieval literature part, because everyone knows that's the most useless thing ever, except medieval French literature, which is even worse. And of course, this is a truck driver and waitress. These are working class people who are paying for people to get these niche boutique degrees, right? Well, first of all, let me just point out that as a species, we've only been writing for 5,000 years. That's it. That's not a lot of time. It's all valuable. It's all part of our patrimony. It's part of our heritage. It's part of our culture. If you don't understand why that's important, you should not be talking about education. You should talk about something else. On top of which, a funny thing happens when you study literature, even the medieval stuff. You learn how to use language better. You learn to understand language. Sometimes you stumble over your own words, but still, you learn how language works. And that comes in handy in any job where you have to use language. It's funny. Now, the third thing is that when that person graduates with a degree in medieval literature, they will have a BA, and their earnings will be twice what they were if they didn't have a BA. This is true across the board. I'll get back to that at the very end of this talk. And then those people pay taxes. You increase the tax base. You increase tax revenue over the long run if you have more people with BAs in your state. It's a very good investment. Sometimes it even benefits truck drivers and waitresses. However, he has set the term of the debate. He got this Colorado Taxpayer Bill of Rights passed. In the battle over government spending, Mr. Bruce won. Quite true. My side lost. The game is over. The recap has already been filed. There's highlights and everything. It's done. So, and as a result, there's more debt that individuals pick up when they go to campus. Again, this is the last 10 years. It is now very close to $1 trillion collectively. Now, some people are okay with that. They say, well, average undergraduate debt's only $25,000. And you know, I call them the debt apologists. They say, that's just like buying a car. So my son says, ... that's a pretty nice car. I can get 2 Kias for $25,000. Or I can get a Kia and a toaster with hamsters in it. You can go with this or you can get with that. My point is, you owe $25,000 in loans, you still don't have a car. You got to buy a car. Let's not make light of this, all right? So what is to be done? The utopian solution, right there, I've heard this proposed. It's never going to happen, but $128 billion in federal funds directly to colleges would make all public higher education in the United States free. It'd be like some Scandinavian paradise. Which sounds totally crazy, see, totally crazy, until you realize we already do this. We do it indirectly, Pell Grants and student loans, and don't get me started on the predatory student loan industry or I will be up here all day. Point remains, the funds are not coming back from Harrisburg. There's no rumbling in Washington for the utopian solution. So what's the good news? The good news is that it's still worth it. Workers with BAs average a little over 50,000. With high school diploma, you're talking about more like 28,000. With an advanced degree, postgraduate education, you're up in the 70s. Without a high school diploma, 18,000, which is really stark. I mean, those are really dramatic figures. The other thing is that you don't need to major in a field that people tell you is employable. But this puts a lot of pressure on people, doesn't it? Especially that skyrocketing debt part. People think, and not without reason, I do not blame them, but people think they have to get out of here, they have to get out of whatever college, and get a high-paying job really quickly. You have to pay off those loans as soon as they can. Understandable. But the challenge is thinking long-term. If you train for X job, there's no guarantee that X job is going to exist 10 or 20 years from now. You want, I hope, a broad education that involves lifelong learning that you can take anywhere. And the last piece of good news, this is a study that just came out. Now, again, I'm asking you to think of the long term. I have to ask the undergraduates in the room today to think, God help you all, about being as old as I am, in your 50s. By your mid-50s, liberal arts majors are on the average making more money than those who study in professional and pre-professional fields. It all evens out in the end. So the bad news, like I say, is that in the battle over public funding, my side lost. The Colorado Taxpayer Bill of Rights and things like it won. And as a result, state support here is down to about 5% and may fall even further, who knows. At which point we want to ask ourselves, do we want to change our name or something? I mean, what's the state part? I mean, it would involve a lot of like rebranding, but you know. The good news is that over the long run, it still makes sense, not only intellectually, but financially. And over the next couple of talks, you'll be hearing from people who will go into a few more of the details about that. And the question really is how to make the most of your time here in all senses. And good luck with that. Thank you.